Hi, everybody. David Nour back with another episode of our Intelligent Growth with my business partner, Jenn Cordz. Hello, Jenn.
Hi, Nour. Great to be here.
Nice to have you. For our audience, this episode, we're going to focus on ideal customer profiles, ICPs, buyer personas, which we'll talk about the difference between those, something that I'm passionate about, and I talk often about, ideal relationship profiles, and it leads to needs-based segmentation. The reason we chose this topic is it still seems like a lot of organizations are in the singles world trying to date everybody, right? You literally ask them, or you see their emails, or you see their LinkedIn posts, and you I don't know about you, but I'm scratching my head like, who is that intended for? Who are you trying to date? Because you cannot date everybody. And maybe Joey from Friends can get away with, how you doing? But the rest of us have to create a unique value and a unique message that resonates with that target audience. So Jenn and I were talking about this idea of how do you intelligently identify growth opportunities. ICPs and personas and relationships kept coming back. So Jenn, I'm going to start with you. Give us your high-level glimpse of why ICPs, personas, relationships matter more than ever before.
Well, as we've talked about in previous episodes, with the changing economy and the variability and the plethora of choices that prospects and customers have nowadays, it's really important to make sure that we're providing value at every step. And knowing who our buyers are is really important to make sure that we're actually meeting them where they are in their journey and making sure that we're also fulfilling their needs. So at the core, that's what it boils down to.
Beautiful. So let's start with very high level. What are the critical attributes of an ICP? Why is it important?
Yeah, so an ICP, ideal customer profile, is what ICP stands for. It comprises of the demographics, the psychographics, kind of the business attributes, the behavioral attributes of what the ideal person is that would find benefit in your solution. So creating and painting a really clear picture on who that person is and kind of what they do in their day-to-day life is really important to frame out. Then the metrics and sort of those firmographic and demographic attributes that you can then create a robust profile of. I have a CFO, and he's a business leader in X industry, leading certain number of employee size, et cetera. And like just building out that picture and that story helps you then define what metrics and what attributes you need to then build out that profile.
Okay, so I want to tighten this up a little bit. Let's talk. You've done this several times. Can you give us an example of an ICP? A little more, a little tighter.
A little tighter. Yeah. So, for example, for a cybersecurity company, a lot of times company marketing just wants to go after CISOs. They want conversations with CISOs, but it really boils down to who's going to have the message resonate best with them. And so it's, are you targeting mid-market, enterprise, or small business? And so defining what that is. And so let's just say it is a security executive, VP and above, of a mid-market business in banking industry with at least 5 to 10 direct reports, with an established security function within the organization. And like those people are going to be buying our solution. And within every organization, you're not going to just have one ICP. You're going to have several, because that message needs to resonate across several levels.
Is that where personas, buyer personas, come in?
It is. Buyer personas is the next level after you define your ICP, and your buyer personas is really focused on that individual, and it allows you to tailor the content to the behaviors that you know that this person may exhibit, and it allows you to incorporate maybe more engaging content and surveys, and that individual person may find their data or do their research in very specific locations, and your information, your thought leadership should be found in those places or show up in the Google searches for the keywords that this type of person would exhibit.
So unless you tell me otherwise, sounds like ICP is more of a macro level. Maybe the company, maybe the industry, maybe number of employees you brought up. Is it, a hyper growth, mid-market enterprise? And then you double click on that. And within that ICP, I'm even further targeting very specific either roles or responsibilities or kind of the needs of that individual. Is that accurate?
Yes, that absolutely would be accurate. And so you and I've talked about before, like beyond the ICPs and the personas, something that you talk about a lot with our clients are the relationship profiles. So how could somebody take both their ICP and their personas and then frame out like an ideal relationship profile?
I think this comment will resonate with our audience. We all have them. Some relationships you're really close to, business relationships. Others, they're neutral. Others, let's be honest, we can't stand, right? So maybe I'm getting older, and this happens when you get older. But life's too short to deal with jerks. Life's too short with people who just get up on the wrong side of the bed every day. So beyond the ICPs and personas, you're right. I coach a lot of leaders and their teams start to identify ideal relationship profiles. And if you think about some of your best relationships and some of your worst relationships, I'm betting there's some attributes, that there are some behaviors, there's some things that they demonstrate on a consistent basis. And you're going to find this next comment shocking. I've never seen horrible prospects become fabulous customers. So if they're demonstrating really bad behaviors early on, it is not going to improve. So look for opportunities to trust. Look for mutual benefit. Do they see you and treat you just as a vendor, or do they see you as a partner? Are you acting as a partner? So really elevate not just the demographic and psychographic. All that stuff is really critical. It's important. I just tend to think of, is there open communication? Is there respect? Is there flexibility and adaptability? I've got a list of these things. Do they play the long game? Are they just interested in immediate transaction, and for 5 or 10% better discount from somebody else, they're going to go somewhere else? Or are they in it for that long-term kind of a viable relationship where, you call them back Friday at 6:00 to kind of help them with something? So if they're not in it for collaboration, if they don't see you as a long-term partner, if there's not mutual accountability and responsibility, I'm not convinced that ICP or even by a persona is going to be more than a transaction. If you think about repeat or referral business, is because of the relationship. So I often talk about this ideal relationship profile that should also be part of the consideration of ideally lookalikes of great customers, great relationships we have today that we want to keep going and finding others. So build on that.
You've also talked about cultural fit for your prospects and your customers. Can you dive into that just a little bit and why that cultural fit really matters?
Yeah. Jenn, I'm a huge believer of observable behaviors, right? I made the comment rhetorically that poor prospects never become great customers. How do on calls or joint meetings, how does the leader, how does the team treat each other? If it's like a family, if it's dysfunctional on the inside, guess what? Everybody sees it. And culturally, do they believe in respect and kindness? Do they believe in soft on people, hard on performance? Do they believe in responsiveness? You and I, without naming names, we've sat around, waited for sysadmin access for days, if not weeks. And what gets under my skin are people that are, I think, lack that self-confidence and that self-esteem that an outsider is going to come and get all up in my business. And so they drip us information.
It's
right?
territorial.
Again, is absolutely territorial, right? And without naming names of, we ask them for 10 things and they give us 2. And I'm sorry, did you not see the rest of the list? Or that just, and you've seen me take that up to the CMO of, look, we're here to help you and we can't prescribe till we diagnose. So if your culture is, and by the way, culture, I've always believed, is a culmination of behaviors you're willing to tolerate.
Yes.
If your culture is one of territorial, this is my sandbox, don't pee in my sandbox, then I don't know how that person's ever going to, and interestingly enough, the person we're talking about is no longer there, right? So it's just that behavioral, that cultural environment isn't conducive to the collaboration, the partnership that I just brought up. So switching over to you, how does, my definition of I just mentioned ideal relationship profiles. How do ICPs or a ideal relationship profile translate into kind of the sales cycle, the sales motions?
Sure. So most sales motions start actually on the marketing side of the funnel, or the fence, if you will. And the ICP and the IRP really help marketing focus on the lead qualification and lead generation. So they're actually placing ads in places that the people sales wants to talk to are present and meeting those prospects where they are. And it also then boils up the behaviors that somebody exhibits, a prospect exhibits on the website, consuming content, and ensures that that person that's exhibiting those behaviors that sales and marketing have agreed and aligned on that matter, those people are the ones that are actually getting moved down the funnel versus the ones that may just be kicking the tires. Beyond that, when you have a conversation with these people, the initial contact and that assessment that happens is important because it validates, is this person actually in our ICP? Is this actually the type of relationship that we're looking for? And so it also shortens the amount of time you're spending with people that may or may not be the right person that either has the authority that you're looking for or even has the need that your company actually addresses. And then that leads us to kind of presentation and proposal in the sales cycle. So if they've gotten through the first two and they're now to the point where you're actually doing demos and you're having conversation with them and you're then maybe it's a buyer committee and now you're expanding that presentation to others, it's then again continuing to validate against, is this whole company and is this team meeting the needs that we have, and are they the right people to then make a buying decision? And then beyond that, there's a couple other phases to the sales cycle, which I'll let you cover because I know you've coached a lot of our clients on that.
Yeah, and it reminds you, I love this because there's, I tend to think of, and we tend to think of kind of a holistic approach, and I think what we came up with like 5 critical areas, as you mentioned, the lead gen and qualification being one, and then the initial contact and needs assessment. Do I really understand kind of where they're going? And if I really understand that ICP, the ideal relationship profile, the way I present, the value, proposition, the messaging that's customized for them, the way I propose, that leads to then negotiating and closing. So my pricing and terms, a lot of times, if I understand that ICP and buyer persona really well, the pricing may not be an issue, but they want better terms, or they're going to have some very specific objections, looking for social proof or looking for where else have you, I don't want to be a guinea pig. Where else have you solved this problem? If I know that, I can better prepare and I can really put our best kind of ammunition of where we've been successful front and center to really help de-risk or help them, de-risk their buying, journey, if you will. Last but not least, and you and I talk a lot about this, we coach every client that the relationship really starts when somebody buys. So, in our customer lifecycle journey, implementation, onboarding, training, creating material impact in their business. It is not, a relationship is seldom just a transaction. Yep, got the PO, we sent out an invoice, I'm done, thanks, see ya, I'm out of here. And I think that's all it's ever going to be, is a transaction. So if you don't create material impact in their business, if you're not thinking about your customers, you should have no expectation of earning the right to call them a repeat customer, earning the right for them to become advocates, if not evangelists for you. And that also, I believe ICPs and definitely ideal relationship profiles also spills into customer service and customer support and engagement. And that's the way they may not remember the transaction. They will always remember the service.
Absolutely.
They will always remember the service. And that's what keeps them coming back.
Yes. Well, and we've talked about also, if you're only engaging with your client when it's time for renewal or at that sale, then you also can't expect that customer is going to want to stay with you for a long time, because you're not respecting the relationship and actually continuing to provide value, checking in on them, being seen as more than a vendor. So we've talked about sort of marketing and then the sales function. Why would CROs and CCOs really care about this type of focus? And then take that one step further, how can a CMO best communicate this focus to their strategic partners across the C-suite?
Yeah, you and I have talked about the chief marketing, chief sales, and chief customer officer as the three-legged stool to every organization's kind of the three critical pillars. It's another way to think about it, of every organization's revenue engine. The three of them have to be aligned. If they're not singing from the same hymnal, if they're not on the same page, and you and I have sat in on QBRs, or we've sat in on leadership meetings, and telltale sign is if whenever you hear us and them, or those guys, or that department, or that function, and if they're not talking about we challenges and we opportunities, we've mentioned this in previous episodes, you kind of get the sense that they're not on the same page. So as you said, a lot of times that engagement, that awareness starts with the marketing function, starts with that team, creating, building a funnel, creating opportunities. Then kind of a track relay race. The baton is then handed to sales to kind of create that engagement and create the opportunity for them to buy. Once they buy, ideally before they buy, customer success takes over and ensures that what they're being promised, in fact, they become, I believe customer success to be advocates of those clients. And, once that client buys, now let's help you implement the promises, that brand promise, that product or service promise you bought into brand or product or service equity. And look at how much you're better off because of what you're doing. Again, without naming names, you and I see a lot of SaaS tech companies promise the world. Let me tell you this. We saw a demo the other day. For our audience, you're going to love this. We saw a demo the other day, and really nice guy. I always assume good intent. But the sales rep just goes down this, his feature function. Let me tell you how great. I swore he was going to say their software is going to microwave my lunch and wash my car and take my dog out for a walk before we were done. And then I'm thinking, how many of your customers are actually using more than 10% of what this technology could do? And it happens all the time. We want to tell you how great we are and how smart we are. Let me just go down the list of 572 features that our platform does, of which none of it, maybe 10%, you'll be able to implement. And I don't understand, why isn't the CMO or the CRO or chief customer officer driving that agenda of, we're going to focus on few things that our product, our solution does exceptionally well, and we're going to make sure clients get a ton of value out of that. And those who do, great. Not only give them a gold star, but let's elevate even their impact greater with that. So I think that the tone starts with the CMO, has to be carried over through CRO, and we got to stop treating customer success as the redheaded stepchildren. Get them involved earlier, get them engaged in that life cycle journey. By the way, marketing should then re-engage, sales should re-engage, because there's upsell and cross-sell opportunities in many organizations. I want to ask you the same. What have you seen work really well in that CRO, CMO, chief customer officer relationships?
Well, as you've mentioned, we've been in meetings and QBRs, and one of the other telltale signs beyond just the us and them is also everybody brings their own version of reports, which they have their numbers, and their numbers tell a different story than a different department's numbers. And really the entire team should be working off of the same set of numbers, maybe with a lens of, here are sales motions specifically, but the core numbers are the same. So that's one of the telltale signs. The other thing is, with the CMO and the CRO, they really do also need to be aligned on who it is we're targeting, because we also hear a lot, well, sales doesn't accept anything marketing creates. And then sales says, well, marketing's creating junk. We can't do anything with that. And so making sure that both teams are part of the conversation to create the ICP and define the personas and define that ideal relationship is really important. And then to your point earlier is that re-engagement and that feedback loop and providing that context that this is what we defined it to be. Here's actually where we're finding success in these conversations, and then getting customer success involved as well of, well, that's who bought it, but this is actually who we've been working with to actually implement the solution. So maybe there needs to be another track added to this persona to get that person engaged sooner. So it's not a afterthought almost. So that's one of the ways to look at it.
I want to add one more. I mentioned earlier, especially for the C-suite, your culture is a culmination of behaviors you're willing to tolerate. So look for observable behaviors in your teams and make sure you're modeling the right behaviors across these different teams. Because if you're not collaborative, if you're not going to the other functions and your peers, and more importantly, coaching your teams to do the same, it's going to show. It's going to show when you're not there. It's going to show amongst the rank and file. Marketing is just a bunch of arrogant people that don't care about what we do. Or sales guys couldn't sell if it was water and they fell out of a boat. Right? Those comments are not constructive. They're not, and you need to nip it in the bud, pronto. Otherwise, it just festers, and it literally becomes a deteriorating kind of cultural cancer through the organization. Because last time I checked, by the way, it also has a lot to do with how you visually communicate. Last time I checked, columns, in a presentation don't convey collaboration. They don't convey, that customer should be at the center of every decision we make. And how are they better off because of what we do, how we do it. So again, I just want to reiterate, amongst those and within those three teams, the culture each leader really develops in their own function will set the tone and how they collaborate across those. So let's move on to the biggest challenges you've seen in implementing a tightly defined ICP persona or ideal relationships.
Sure. So there's three main challenges that I see when we're trying to implement ICPs, personas, and ideal relationship profiles. The first one being a team does it kind of in a silo. So marketing creates the ICP and the personas, and they don't really ask for feedback from the other teams. And so they go do it off in their own little corner. And this is who we need to talk to without actually looking at any of the data. So it's not a data-driven decision. There's no collaboration across the teams. And it doesn't necessarily have the stickiness, and it doesn't necessarily resonate with the other teams because they did it in a silo. So that's number one. Number two would then actually come to data silos, data collection, just even analysis of that data, completeness of profiles. And so it really comes down to the robustness of the data that exists within the ecosystem that they're working in. Do they have titles, phone numbers, industries, et cetera? Like that data collection is really important. The third one that I would say is also they try and over-engineer it too much. And so instead of starting very basic, they try and get too granular, too specific, and they cut out too much of the market. And we've talked about this in previous episodes where it's the total addressable market and the total relevant market. If you narrow that focus too fast, too quick, then you're not having enough at-bats. And so if you try and over-engineer or create too much complexity in this system, you're not then able to do some of that A/B testing to then further fine-tune. So teams don't start broad enough and then fine-tune down. They start super narrowly focused, and they won't be able to test and effectively get the stickiness and traction. So those are the top three challenges that I think of.
let's build on, and I've seen it, and again, just to reiterate your comments, from data collection analysis to resource allocation, right? So we build it, but we don't have the resources and we don't have the budgets to then really integrate it, processes or tech stack into what we're doing. Or as you said, we go into some of these organizations and I swear, I feel like you need a PhD in astrophysics to figure out what they're trying to do with the 70 plus systems that somebody's got an itch that they've bought and bolted on, and they've got this Frankenstein. And by the way, you ask, I'm sorry, how do you guys do what you do? Well, it depends on the day of the week and which direction the wind is blowing. And, there's no playbook. There's no consistency in their processes and what they do and how they do it. And I'm sorry, I've just started here as a rep. How do I get trained? And how am I measured? And how do I make sure I'm calling on the right people so I'm not, being inefficient or ineffective in my efforts? Because nothing will take the wind out of a brand new sales reps. I don't care if you're a 20-something BDR or a corporate rep or enterprise rep. Nothing takes the wind out of their sales versus, trying something really hard for a while and having nothing to show for it. So if that environment isn't in place to set people up to succeed, you've done a really interesting exercise in identifying our ICP and buyer personas and buyer journeys. And let me show you how fabulous we are. And it's theoretical at best. And we haven't done anything to implement it.
Well, we've also talked about that. I mean, as much credit as sales gets for closing deals and being really successful, they also want the easiest path. They don't want a lot of data entry. They don't want to have to jump through a ton of hoops to get their job done. And so if whoever's created these ICPs do make it really complex and over-engineered and whatnot, sales is going to go do their thing, especially if they're an enterprise level rep. They know how to sell. They know who they need to talk to, and they're going to go off and do their own thing that then doesn't align. And then when operations or the data team pulls a report, there's outliers and there's no consistency. And then you can't actually then generate a plausible story of, well, this worked, this didn't work, because everybody's doing their own thing. And to your point, there's no repeatable process.
Yeah. So building on that, the ICP persona, buyer persona we're talking about, Jenn, also has to impact reporting and the executive dashboards you've built and communicating updates on our go-to-market kind of efforts. How does it do that?
Yeah. So as we mentioned, when we've sat in these BDRs or QBRs before, and had different functions bring their own sets of reports, when we create that unified dashboard, consistently communicating what that ICP is and who those personas are is important to not only reinforce across all the teams that this is who we're targeting, but then also show the traction against those different functions. So if we're talking about data, for example, how many people do we have in the database that meets whatever personas that we're looking at, and have them all delineated, and completeness of profiles. And then also, how deep in the funnels are these people, and what engagement do we have with them? How many opportunities have we closed? So you're looking at all the same metrics that you would from just a regular marketing sales funnel report, but you're then layering on this ICP and buyer persona to give you that deeper granularity of who's actually buying our solution and why it matters, like getting that resonance and getting that engagement, and sort of then being able to do those tests and pull those levers of, if we change one thing, does it help improve our numbers or does it hurt us?
By the way, for our audience, one of the things we've learned in working with just a broad array of clients is your reporting and executive dashboards are directly correlated to the investments you're willing to make of time, effort, and resources in building a data-driven decision-making culture. So you cannot generate reports. You cannot get insightful executive dashboards if you're not willing to capture that data, if you're not willing to put that data in systems that it can be reported. I keep coming back to it. I think we've talked about this before, trying to help a client who wants to generate reports for his venture-backed company, for the leadership team and the board, and yet the entire process is manual.
Yes.
And it is painful to try to automate that. So it's not, when I say investment, it's not just dollars, it's the time and the effort to capture that data. And full disclosure, Jenn and I've had several heated conversations about our own business and trying to generate reports out of our own efforts. And I love the question she asked of, okay, tell me about the outcome. Tell me what you're trying to do. Well, I want to know, where are best opportunities coming from? And how long does that process take? And the ones that we win versus the ones that we don't, what are the differences? And Jenn, I love your comment of, okay, is that stuff captured? Are you capturing this, the lead sources?
Where is that information today?
Are you capturing the lead sources? And are you tracking your progress and activities and touches? And we have the tools, but until I and the rest of our team commit to updating those and tracking those, no report you're going to be able to pull out of any of these systems are going to give us the accuracy of how long, in fact, is taking us and how many touches. And are we talking to the right people? And how do we shorten the sales cycle or increase the average sales price of our engagements? And so it goes back to that again, commitment to what I said earlier, a data-driven decision-making culture.
Well, and one of those things also is when you're trying to implement some of these dashboards and reports, don't just add fields, don't just add things, like figure out the outcome, ask the question, what are the outcomes that we're looking for? And then it's on the ops team to go backwards and figure out, okay, where do we get this data? How do we track this data? Is there a way I can get this data without adding keystrokes to other teams? And so it's removing that friction in a way that you still get the outcome you're looking for without making it burdensome to the other teams, because they're not going to want to do it. And if you add a whole bunch of required fields, then people are going to start filling those fields in with junk. And we've talked about it before, dirty data in, dirty data stays, or garbage in, garbage stays, because they just want to get through their job. They just want to be able to save that record and move forward to go on to their next sales call. And so if you make it hard, people are not going to do what you actually ask them to do. So it's really a cultural shift on adopting some of these things.
That's exactly right. So you and I talked about, part of this session is also on segmentation. And I know there's kind of traditional segmentation and needs-based segmentation. Talk about the difference between those, because I think we've identified, 6 or 8 different attributes with segmentation that's really critical that we keep seeing clients hit and miss some.
Yeah. So when I refer to something as traditional segmentation, I'm looking at mainly the firmographic and demographic information, like geography, title, size, vertical, operations, process. Like all of those are key data points that are firmographic, demographic. Now, when you transition to a needs-based segmentation, you're looking at what problems are they having? What challenges are they doing? Are they risk averse? Like, where are they in their journey? What actionable insights can we generate from them? And it actually transitions the way you sell from doing just certain tactics to then actually having a strategy and a value-based selling methodology. And so I'm going to actually turn the question on you, because you've also done a lot of segmentation work with some of our clients. Like, how do you see them approaching the segmentation versus needs-based segmentation?
You bring up a great point. Traditional segmentation often looks at demographics and behavioral, whereas needs-based really focus on addressing the problem, the desires, the needs that the product or service can address. So, again, you and I, in our preparation, talked about there's 8 kind of distinct topics, 8 things that I want the audience to kind of think about, remember, which is, if you think about what is it that they need. And by the way, a lot of prospects, if you do interviews, if you do surveys, know what they want. I'm not convinced they know what they need. The difference is your consultative approach. The difference is you asking enough intelligent, engaging questions to figure out not just what they're trying to do, but why are they trying to do it? And what's the desired outcome and impact on their business, not just the output. So number one, is it identifiable? Is it measurable? Because I have a need to be wealthy because I want to be an international man of leisure. I'm sorry. How do we identify? How do we measure that? So I want to get them down to the reality of, realistically, can we identify it? Can we measure that need? Again, difference between a want and a need. 2, are there emotional or functional aspects to it? Why? It goes back to why do they want to do this? And how will they be better off when they do this? One of the challenges with fuzzy needs is I don't know what it looks like when we get there. I don't know what it looks like when we achieve it. So again, I'm trying to tighten the aperture. I'm trying to really narrow down their focus of what they're trying to do, why, and how they're trying to do it. Customer journeys and life cycles. The reason I added that to our slides is, how well do they understand the various, purchase stages, or the longevity of how long are they going to go around this loop? So really understanding the journeys and the life cycles.
And even understanding it, but then also knowing where they are in this is also really important.
That's exactly right. Behaviors and preferences. What are the usage patterns? Are there some price elasticity or sensitivity in what they're willing to pay to solve that problem? Yeah, I would love a Lamborghini, but I have a budget for a VW Bug. I just, come on, realistically, there's some price sensitivity of what they're, how much value does that customer place on solving that specific need? Because if they're not willing to pay a premium for it, are you willing to create a one-off solution for it? And that one-off solutions become really expensive. And we've seen customers go on, and Jason, our colleague who leads our product management efforts, talks a lot about this. We go on tangents, and the trunk of the tree suddenly becomes all these branches because, we go after every possible need every possible customer has, and you've suddenly have kind of lost sight of that. Next, actionable insights, from customization and communication of that. Understanding the need helps you customize the product or service better to kind of meet, if not exceed, that customer demand. And you communicated very targeted messaging, very targeted advertising that speaks directly to what that need is. Complexity and variability. A lot of needs often tend to be multidimensional. We need this and this. Okay, pick one. No. We need this and this. So, and by the way, it can change over time. That's the fascinating thing. Their needs evolve. A lot of customers' needs require ongoing research, ongoing adaptability, ongoing conversations. So I'm fascinated by this, of companies who do a QBR inside the organization. What's the status of this deal? Where we're going with this customer? What's the status of this product? How we're doing on service? And they have none of these conversations with their customers. And I'm like, what happened to a quarterly touch base with your most valuable? It goes back to the ideal relation profile. Do we do a quarterly QBR with our customers? How are we doing? Where are we falling short? What's the one thing we could do to serve you better? If you're not asking these questions, you don't have your finger on the pulse of the relationship with that customer. You were going to add something?
Yeah, and as you solve one problem for a customer, like as you said, their needs evolve, but also as that company grows and scales, and as your company grows and scales, you have the ability to meet more needs of the customer with additional features and functionality, or even as the customer's business grows and scales, perhaps they've now transitioned into something that you also have a solution for and you can help them with it. So it's that continuous education and that continuous touch base that you mentioned. It's important.
Randy Seidel, founder and CEO of the sales community, has been a longtime friend and a client. And, I distinctly remember him at HP, advocating to the sales team, SEAT, sell everything on the truck. The way you do that is by better understanding not just what their current needs are, but anticipating their future needs and having those conversations, which leads to data-driven, points, 7 and 8, data-driven research is required. Ongoing needs-based segmentation is all about the research, surveys, interviews, focus groups, identifying those needs. You're trying to constantly, it's never a switch the dial. How do I dial in what that need really is about? And not just what they're trying to do, but why are they trying to do it? What does that lead to? Tell me more about that. That's interesting. What would that look like? You do enough of that, and you start to get quantifiable metrics. Oh, so if I do this beyond the qualitative, I can also get quantitative metrics to really effectively monitor how we're doing against that need. This isn't, well, kind of, maybe, no. What's the old adage? Close only counts in horseshoes and grenades. You gotta get this need tightened up, because the last point, business goal alignments. If the needs aren't revenue prioritization, resource allocation, cost savings, more efficient, effective utilization of the resources we have, it becomes a wish list. And it's never really going to align with the business goals, align with the capabilities to then allocate the right resources to meet there. So just a quick recap. Needs-based segmentation. 8 attributes to think about: identifiable and measurable metrics, emotional and functional aspects, customer journeys and life cycles, unmet or underserved needs, actionable insights, complexity and variability, data-driven, business goal alignment.
That's a great list. And so with that, are there any final thoughts that you'd want people to think about as they're doing their ICPs, personas, or ideal relationship profile work?
I'm going to jump in. I'd love for you to add to it. I'm going to go back to an analogy I used earlier. If you look at the dating sites, by the way, it's been several presidents since I've dated, but if you look at the dating sites, you cannot date everybody. You got to stay focused on, as an organization, where have we been successful in identifying and meeting, if not exceeding, those needs. And if you look at some of those customers, if you really identify, it's about narrowing your focus. Again, every organization, every leader you and I meet, they want more. We want more customers. We want more prospects. We want a bigger pipeline. I would submit you need fewer customers, fewer relationships, but build deeper, build more meaningful, build more mutually value-based relationships, build a bigger barriers to entry by competitors, by really understanding and catering to their needs in the areas that you've chosen, your products, your services, your solutions to really focus on. So if you double down on this idea of ICPs and buyer journeys, it really helps you focus limited resources on the lowest hanging fruit, on the best possible opportunities for us to identify the needs, meet and or exceed those needs, and really create a lasting relationship with this client. Your thoughts on ICPs, buyer personas, and segmentation?
Well, I would echo your comment about using the data to help define this. Taking the time. So if you're an established organization, you've been selling a while, and now you're transitioning maybe to an ABX type motion, go look at your data and across marketing, sales, customer success, and the opportunity funnel, and really find the commonality and the trends behind all of that, and start at that macro level, and then start getting granular and try and keep it as simple as possible and get that collaboration and that buy-in from the 3 groups. And then, to your point, this isn't an on and off switch. We've talked about it before. No operation is a set it and forget it. And so go back and revisit what those are, either on a quarterly basis or a semi-annual basis. Anything less than that, you're setting yourself up for failure. But I would say on a quarterly basis, at least check. Are we still resonating with the people that we should be talking to, that we identified? Who else maybe has come out and surfaced as somebody we should be talking to? But keep it simple and use the data to actually make your decisions, and keep that alignment between the 3 teams is my best recommendation.
Love it. Love it.
So, David, I know you and I've kind of worked on our calendar of upcoming episodes for Intelligent Growth.
Yes. So whether you're joining us on watching the streams of these, or you listen to this content in your favorite source to listen to podcasts, we've got some great episodes coming up. So next episode, we're going to talk about your next acquisition. We're still seeing a lot of M&A opportunities. We're pulled into a lot of M&A opportunities, part of our due diligence or kind of between the announcement and the close and really diving in. So we're going to talk about your next acquisition and the tech stack considerations, specifically 3 perspectives you may be ignoring. The episode after that, we're going to talk about data maturity. We've partnered with a company called Versalytics, and they've got a fabulous data maturity from an organization standpoint, and the evolution of data silos in every organization. Every organization has it, not intentionally, but they create data silos. And we want to talk about how to evolve from that. Episode after that, we're going to talk a lot about change management and really fueling intelligent growth. We're planning a fun but a very realistic scenario that happens, and we'll reveal that in the future episode of chaos that forces all of us to change. And we're going to talk a lot about change management and key attributes of change management that are going to be critical for you to continue to drive intelligent, hopefully profitable growth. So I hope you'll join us again each Tuesday at noon Eastern. We post a new episode. We often have guests that join us. Jenn and I also share our perspectives from clients we work with, research that we do, or partners and friends in the industry, in the go-to-market world that we collaborate with. Whether you join us on these episodes or listen again, we repurpose these for our podcast, and I hope you'll continue to join us for our podcast, wherever you consume podcasts. I'm David Nour. On behalf of Jenn, Cordz, it's been another episode of Intelligent Growth. Make it a great rest of your day. We'll hope to see you soon. Thanks, everybody.